This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, miniatures, and paints, discount prices at miniaturemarket.com. Hey everybody, it's your old pal Rob. Today we have a very special interview for you. And you're going to also be able to listen to it on the podcast. Today we have an interview with Greg Dalgliesh, and we're going to be talking about Columbia Games. You're really going to like this. When I taped this, I was really amazed at how great this company is, and how historically this company has moved me through the years, playing all their different types of game. Quebec was one of the first games I ever played, but their block system is original, and it's really amazing what they've been able to do. So without further ado, we have Grant coming up here. I hope you enjoy this interview. They have a Kickstarter going today, going right now. It goes all the way to May 3rd, and you're going to want to check it out. It is Julius Caesar, the deluxe edition of this. You're really going to want to check this out. I'm going to be doing a video on it that'll go up the same time this goes up, so please swing over there, check that out, and then listen to how fascinating 50 years of Columbia Games has been, and all the things that they've got going on and things that they've got planned for the future. Without further ado, here is Grant. Hey everybody, it's your old pal Rob. We've got another exciting interview today. Grant Dalgliesh from Columbia Games. I hope I didn't butcher that. I could barely hear myself because I'm actually partially deaf in this ear. So when I try to say things, I don't hear myself that well, and I butcher everything. So forgive me, Grant. But Columbia Games, folks, is a very historic company. It's been around for over 50 years. And I want to welcome you to the show, first of all, and thank you for coming on here and talking with us. And the first thing I've got to ask you, now your father's Tom, who started the company. You started it in 1972, if I'm not correct.
That is true. Yeah.
Okay. And you decided to work with him after a while.
Yeah, well, always. It's been in my family and my blood forever. We did like assembly of things when I was a little kid, helping, in the shop. Grew up in and around it, putting boxes together, things like that. It was really cool. A little later, I got into contributing,
which we'll talk about.
Yeah, there's some specific things that were landmark phases in that, but one of the earliest, when I was a little kid, like about 11, 12 years old, I remember getting involved in the role playing. So half of our company is fantasy role playing, and
which you wouldn't know, you know, which is kind of funny because, a matter of fact, and I want to make sure Harn's World is
Harn, yeah, the Harn World. Harn World is kind of a name for the product. The place is Harn, and it's a world. Harn is actually just an island off the coast of a continent on a world, but it's the focus. It's the place that got the most development and continues to get the most development from us and the writer team. And that's where I got started. I mean, aside from playing games with my dad back in the way old like kids games and stuff, the stuff that caught my interest personally was the role playing at that age. And I remember we did a product. My dad's an old sailor. He was in the British Merchant Marine coming out of Scotland.
Really?
He left home about 16 years old from Aberdeen and never went back. So he's got a passion for the sea and sailing. And we did a product for Harn that was called the Pilot's Almanac. And we still have that product. It's all about provisioning a ship, sailing a ship. And he made a game out of it where you sailed a ship on hex paper working around obstacles and trying to manage the wind and the tide and the currents. And I loved that. I had such a good time with that as a little kid. And so he gave me a task to do some calculations for what are tantamount to character sheets for ships. So we and my friend Joel calculated the length and the beam and the height and the amount of tonnage of various ships, and that was part of the product. It was like the template that people could use to make other ships, and our names are in that book. And it was 1987, and so I that was the first time, and I certainly never looked back from that.
And that was at the height. I mean, when role playing was like really strong too, of all things. So I mean,
yeah, well, that was an interesting
time.
It's a huge span of time when you think about the arc of it, the 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad actually is pretty good at being, Johnny on the spot in a sense. He was doing war games in the 70s when war games were big, and he was in role playing early, really, when it was big, and then he was in collectible cards when they were big, and now we got a little of everything, and it's all stable, and I like to call it almost evergreen. Most of the products and games that we have ever created are still around and supported, and that's the strategy.
Yeah, a matter of fact, you have coming up on Kickstarter is a 50th anniversary of the Quebec 1759, which is one of the first games that I played, and I think one of the first games that you guys came out with.
It's the first game. It
is the first 1972. Yeah, so that's when it came out.
The first one that was published as a formal game, and there's a whole story in there how it's not just a game; it's a genre. It pioneered the concept of the blocks.
Well, that's what a question I honestly want to ask you, and I didn't mean to cut in there on you.
That's fine.
But it has to do with this is, 1972, you think about all the games that were out there. It was all that chit base. Okay. And now you guys decide to come out with a block Fog of War base game. Yeah. Okay. Which had, for your father, okay, had to be incredibly, there's only one way to put it, ballsy, to go against completely the grain of everything that you could imagine. Okay. And then basically say, hey, I know all you hardcore war gamers are playing this way, but here's this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my dad's style. Just break the rules. He's done it many times. And that there's some pioneering that was in there, and we can talk about it right down to the details, because it's an anecdotal story that's famous. It's in the lore of Columbia Games and my father, and it's that he was playing an Avalon Hill chit game of Waterloo, and the story it's paraphrased and simplified, but he was charging up a hill with a squadron of soldiers, and rolled on a CRT odds table, calculating the odds at I think 3-1 or something, and he rolled the outlying result where attacker was eliminated just completely, and he said, that's just not okay. Like 28 guys rounded down divided by 7 makes 4-1 odds, but you don't get one side or the other wins like 100%. It just can't be. And so that particular experience opened his mind to the concept of step reduction. And that's actually, the blocks are two things: the Fog of War that you see right away, when you can't see the other opponent's stuff, but it's more than just what thing it is. It's how strong it is because of step reduction. And we rotate the pieces, and the number at the top is the current strength. And so those two concepts were designed to encapsulate complex things. Fog of War, step reduction, meaning gradual taking of casualties, Previously, people had come up with flipping over counters or substituting counters. This is a very elegant solution, and that's also what I would give my dad a lot of props for being for always searching for the elegant solution to any problem in design or even life, but that gives the most feel for the least overhead. And it's a balance, right? Because it's actually easier to make a complicated game in a lot of ways.
To make it too complicated.
It's
that's one of the things that we had you on here, and of course, thank you for coming on, but also is to show the elegance of this game. And I don't think a lot of people get what this is. There is a simplified, it's easy to learn, but impossible to master.
Yeah, that's kind. Yeah, Quebec is still being played to this day. And, and the other game that we're going to talk a lot about today, just because we can't talk about them all, is Julius.
Oh, yeah, we can.
Well, we can rattle them off, and we can.
It's my show. We'll do what the hell we want.
Awesome. So yeah, it's a system invented and then adapted, ever since. And it's really also cool how it's now become a genre that other companies produce block games, and it's a very high compliment, actually.
Well, you look at one of now. I know Richard Borg very well.
Sure.
He lives here in Florida. Matter of fact, you're on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Washington?
I'm in Washington State, as close to Vancouver, Canada as you can be. The
Seahawk fan?
Yeah, when I like football, which is half of the time. I'm a bandwagon because hockey is my sport.
Mine too. I love hockey, and the two teams that I follow that mean the world to me are my beloved Seahawks. Now, I grew up in Connecticut. Okay. And I was the only Seahawk fan there.
Sure.
Okay. Back in 1976, good luck trying to find a game, but I was a quarterback and I was left-handed. So Jim Zorn was my guy.
Okay.
So love the Seahawks, but I am a Toronto Maple Leaf fan through and through.
The Canadian connection. Yes.
Yeah.
I actually fell in love with them too back in 1990 when they won the World Series, and that was quite a team.
The Blue Jays, the Maple Leafs haven't won a thing since '69.
How did I mix that up? Of course, yeah, it's something like 50-year drought and an absolute.
If we could get out of round one, it'd be a miracle. And the funny thing is they're playing here in Tampa. And Saturday, I haven't been feeling very well, and I wanted to go to the game. I go, but if I go to that game, we're going to lose. And then it turned out we won, in overtime. And I go, of course, because I didn't go.
No, that's a reinforcing prophecy. That's not good. That means you. Yeah, it's hockey for sure. I am now a Kraken fan, but my heart is with the Canucks, and I play in little men's beer league hockey once a week.
Oh, there you go.
And we love that. It's a non-contact league. Sometimes you bump into your other people, but mostly we try not to because we have real lives and real jobs. And we don't want.
You have to go. You have to go to work at some point.
It's my passion, and you've seen through your years in the gaming that the game Slapshot.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you because I don't lie. This is the first time I've seen this.
Oh, wow. All right. So there you're in for a treat. Slapshot as a hockey fan is even better, but it's actually just a wonderful game for anybody, really. It's quite clever. It's simple. Again, on the surface, too simple, but it's deeper than it looks. And it's a lark. Of course, it's a pun-filled spoof of hockey. It's not a simulation because, frankly, sports simulations don't don't satisfy me, at least. This is, you're the manager in this context of a team, and it's trading cards with other players, trading players, um, drafting players, and playing games. And when you do play a hockey game with another player, it's actually tantamount to that classic card game war, where you just flip down cards and the big card wins. And if you get a tie, you know that whole thing. And a little bit like that, you play hockey, comparing the teams effectively one card at a time, and you can challenge whichever other human player you want to. You try to challenge the bad teams to win. You draft when you need to improve your team, and you also can trade with other teams. Trading is actually more like stealing, because you take a card from another team, sight unseen, and you take it, and then you look at it, and you give a card back to that team. And there are positions: goaltender, 2 defensemen, and 3 forwards that make up a hockey team. You always maintain that ratio in your hand. So sometimes actually you can make a bad trade where you have to give back a better card than you got. But theoretically, you trade with the good teams to give yourself odds of stealing a good player. And that's a nice effect. It has a beautiful balancing, self-regulating effect, that somebody gets a little too far ahead and everybody trades with them and steals all their good players. And so you have to actually manage a team, use it before you lose it, to accrue some wins. And a win is as easy as whipping through the cards. Somebody wins, somebody loses, and advance your puck. If you won up the season standings, you're trying to get the first to 9 wins, and that triggers the playoffs. Then we have best of 7 with the 2 top players that play hockey. There's a couple of other little twists, like bruisers, a player that injures whoever they are compared against in a game, in the war type comparison, knocks them out. So your team is a little bit fluid in that sense, and it's all a lot of fun. It's both a lark, simple, easy kids game if you wish, but also it can be played rather strategically, because ultimately making the correct choice each turn, making the optimal choice is the strategy. And
But that kind of sums up this company, though, in my eyes. Simple. You can have kids play it, but yet there's this complexity that it doesn't just sit in a window. It's a wide window, and anybody can be invited in to really enjoy these tremendous experiences that you guys have created.
That's been the best part of the whole thing, because after all, what I'm doing here is selling fun. And
yeah,
I love that, because I get a lot of strokes, a lot of praise, little backlash now and then, but nothing really. And compared to trying to sell something mundane like car insurance or something, this is a lot more fun. And so I've had the benefit and the pleasure of doing that all these years. And so 50 years, and now let's see if we can do another 50.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize it was 50 years, and I'm a little long in the tooth myself, and I went 50 years, my God. I remember playing this, playing that, and all sorts of things. The one I wanted to talk to you about, and we'll talk about a few of them here, but it's one thing I noticed about it. Now, this one right here, which is Wizard Kings.
Yes.
All right. This is one that you developed with your father.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because both of you have it.
Yeah.
How was that? I mean, because out of all the games, I think this is the only one that you both are credited working on together without assistance of anybody else.
Is
that accurate?
It's accurate empirically, of course, with the credits. I might say that many of the titles that have come out since then involved another person, such as Jerry Taylor or Justin Thompson. And out of deference to them, there's a certain amount of allowing them to have a more full billing. And my dad, though, he would never give up some billing. So he's the co-designer. I'm always listed there as a developer, but really, it's been a team for a long, long time. We work very well together because we share that same vision of how to keep it simple, stupid, to use the old cliche. And so Wizard Kings, again, it's what's cool about that is it's an engine. It's like a system for playing. It represents a lot of complex stuff in a nice, simple little package. It still uses the blocks that I mentioned earlier, pioneered way back in '72 with Quebec. Wizard Kings is from the year 2000. And the blocks themselves operate the same way as they ever did, with the fog of war and the step reduction. And it's a real nice parallel. It means when you're learning one of these games, you've learned most of them at the same time. And that's really quite a nice shortcut. It does tend to capture people and make them into blockheads, to be kind. And so Wizard Kings, if it almost was an evolution of a few different spots. It came directly from a game engine, again, another engine, I use the word on purpose, called Victory. And that came out a couple of years before Wizard Kings. Victory is a World War II era game. The modern word for it that is a beautiful descriptor is a sandbox game. Wizard Kings is also a sandbox game. So Victory came out first, and it was that itself was pioneered out of a game that was called Power that my dad had developed in the 70s and maybe the 80s too, and played with forever and ever and ever. And he had dug that out a few times over the decades, and then he and I made it into Victory. And I'm actually surprised I didn't insist on my name being on that one, because it was the first time that we did that kind of thing together. And Victory, because it was a sandbox and it was wildly successful, we were able to expand it with more maps and more pieces. Then we thought, well, let's just do this all again with fantasy. And we even debated calling it Fantasy Victory. So that's my actual proof of how my brain was looking at it at the time. But instead, my father dreamt up a Wizard Kings, and it's a great name. And it became a brand. And so that's what he does well, is come up with the big picture stuff, new stuff, and then together he and I kind of shoehorn it into a beautiful package that has as little of overhead, as little rules as possible, with as much experience.
And it's absolutely beautiful. And when I get off with this, I'm going to your site and I'm ordering Victory. And anybody that wants to get any of these games, you want to go to columbiagames.com, which are just absolutely, you just don't realize what you get in here. And these maps, they all go together and they're just huge and beautiful. It's kind of hard to see here.
Sure.
But
that's called geomorphic, how they rearrange in any which way you want to build a different continent. The catalog has a nice picture of that as well for folks who can see that.
And the block, and I know people can't see the blocks, but I'm going to be doing a video on this, as a matter of fact, which everybody should see next week at some time, because this interview will go up on our podcast on Wednesday as well as on the channel on Wednesday. So next week, we're actually going to do a live playthrough of I believe it's Isle of the Dead, which is the solo scenario, which is great because it's going to teach the game and really get everybody to understand it. But my God, this Victory, I'm going to get my hands on. And there's a couple of other ones here that are just absolutely blow me away, which is Combat Infantry and Eastern Front, which are
those are really two completely different things, and of course the similarities are there with blocks and concepts. In fact, a lot of concepts. But combat infantry is our answer to squad leader. It's squad leader with blocks. It's a tactical block game. The first time we've done, well, it's not quite the first time, but it's the ranged combat and hex adjacency and engagement was pioneered actually in Gettysburg, a game we put out in 2004. And combat infantry borrows from Gettysburg quite a bit. Surprisingly, it works very well. Really, again, what we try to do there was to put it all in, all the complexities and nuances and sophistication that you would expect in tactical combat, but with 8 or 12 pages of rules. And you have to make some hard choices. Some things you have to simplify or abstract out. But that's the knack that I learned from my dad, and he still engenders in me all the time, to just find the seam where you get what you need and throw out the stuff that gets in the way. So, I mean, combat infantry, a simple example or a very poignant example of that is most tactical games have a concept that's called opportunity fire. And if you're a tactical guy, you know what that means. So, surprise, believe it or not, we built a tactical game without having that. And we threw it out. We tried, we played, we worked hard to make it work. And I hated it. I couldn't come up with mechanics that I liked that were clean and smooth. So we threw it out, but we didn't ignore it. We solved the problem with the movement rules, and with impulses, where you're only actually ever moving probably 3 or 4 blocks at a time before the other guy gets to move. And that's actually itself interesting, because those 3 or 4 blocks that you move are one platoon, and you have to make a choice as you're playing the game. You got your opponent sitting across and you can't quite see his stuff, and you're going to activate one at a time and then move the associated blocks. And the other guy is going to go, so it's interleaved. And what we did there was make it fluid and dynamic and interactive enough that we were able to throw out that specific rule called opportunity fire, and you don't miss it, which, superficially, sometimes we've had players sit down and play the game and or read the rules and see that opportunity fire isn't in there and just can't get their head around. How can it be? And so I challenge you to play it and then tell me if you miss it. And that's something that we've done a lot of times over the years in a lot of these games. And so if you're too quick to make assumptions, you might miss what's going on there. The actual playing of it is what's important. And that's what reveals sometimes why those decisions were made. And it might take a while to notice repeated playings. And so combat infantry has now been expanded. It's become a line like Wizard Kings or Victory. There's an East Front version, and we got some more coming in the near future. But got the Desert is probably our next one. So it's going to be British soldiers, American as well, but British and Germans mostly, and some Commonwealth stuff. And that's going to be great. We're got to have some Canadians, right?
Right. Well, of course.
And then we can mix that all up and move them over and play a D-Day type invasion with Canadians and Brits. It'll be lots of fun. It's again a sandbox. You get to do what you want with it, and people get a lot of value out of that because it's forever fun. You can dig it out and play a little game on one map, plays in half an hour, 45 minutes, or you can play a great big game, fill your whole table and maybe a whole weekend. And
again, yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And just anywhere in between. It's really neat how you can do that.
Yeah. And again, to really hit home, you can come out with you can make this an introduction for somebody that's never played any type of war games. And I can't stress that enough. And it sucks them in. Yeah. It's one of those things, I started my son on a Columbia game.
That's
Okay,
good news.
like I said, Quebec, and he played it, and we just never looked back. We went to Rommel, in the Rommel in the desert. We had played that, and to your credit, you guys started doing deluxe editions. As a matter of fact, which we have right here, and I want to show everybody that it's not all just paper maps. These deluxe editions are just. This board is just absolutely gorgeous. And I'm just going to open this up here, hopefully, without making too much of a fool of myself on my podcast, which I shouldn't worry too much about. But I mean, look at that. I mean, just look, if I don't mess it all up here. There we go. All right. I mean, just if everybody's just unbelievable quality, and this, I'm just excited to break this out because of the map and how beautiful it is. What made you guys go instead of just staying very comfortable where you were? Okay,
I think
hey, deluxe editions.
Yeah, well, I think you have to keep with the times. I mentioned earlier how my father was able to adapt and be in different markets within the adventure hobby gaming, but different subgenres as needed. But it's for what's popular, but also for what strikes his interest, because after all, it is his passion and his business, and he got to shape it how he wanted in that sense as well. But it's a very interesting long-term process that it's where I don't know quite why it led only now to the deluxe editions, but I think it's long overdue. I think these games are first rate. They've always been classy because the wooden blocks are classy, but people had a fair case to make a point about mounted maps, and in the old days that wasn't expected, and
no, it's all paper maps.
Yeah, and our cardboard maps that we actually had from the beginning were superior to the paper maps. So it goes back and forth like a pendulum. We were ahead of the curve at one point where everyone said, look at the quality of these games with the wooden blocks and card maps and all the color and good looking stuff. And then if you sit on your laurels too long, the rest of the world catches up. So that's what we're doing. We're just keeping up and pushing to another level forward. And it's a beautiful thing. I think it's a perfect evolution of these beautiful games that they look as beautiful as they play. So I'm happy. I'm really quite happy. And as to why we would never want to sit on our laurels, so to speak, because it's part of the fun is trying to innovate. And we also have this concept I mentioned of trying to keep all the titles in print. So there's a bit of a competing force there to look backward as well as look forward. And so we do a balance there, innovating within, improving the quality is a way of doing that, but generally not changing the game. Sometimes that happens. Of course, there are additions and changes that go on, but a lot of the time, that's not the point. That we're not reissuing a game just because we've changed it. We're issuing it because we sold out, and it's in demand, and we want to keep it in print, emotionally and also fiscally and strategically. And I think it's part of the reason we're still around, just because we've always got a little something for someone to buy and to make a paycheck, which is at the end of the day, that's still on the table, right? You got to do that.
You've been, I mean, you've been around 50 years. You obviously are doing some things right, but if you had to look over this time, and just particularly in the time that you've been here, what are some of the things that you felt that were challenges that were really tough for you guys, and some of the things that maybe you would have changed along the way if you had to?
Wow, the most obvious thing to bring up is the family dynamic, right? You know, the father and son that we could never be equal. I'm the boy and he's the dad, so we always had that dynamic, and yet I'm fairly strong-willed, and so we had some epic debates and arguments and even fights over the years about this or that, whether it was life or game concepts. He fights passionately about both, which I think is wonderful. So we debated intensely many things, and always come through the other side with an agreement, and I think a better result. But it is true that when you look at that from the outside and other people witnessed it, it isn't necessarily easy to watch. And I guess if I could have made it work a little better, there might be some relationships that we weren't able to keep going, because the creative egos came head to head with my dad, who is the guy and the publisher and the owner and the guy taking the chances, so reserves the right to have the final say, and then and sometimes to a developer or designer who couldn't embrace that. And it's interesting because we're unique in this way. A lot of game publishers are publishers that a title is brought to their attention and they buy the rights to it or secure a contract and publish it. There's not one game in our catalog that my dad didn't have his hands in, and good or bad, right? That's both a strength,
a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, because, well, certainly the curse is that we're the bottleneck, and so we slow it down. And there were certainly many times where some developers and designers ran out of patience. And some, in fact, that's how it came to pass that other companies published block games, is they were actually, I don't want to say a reject by Columbia Games. That's not accurate, because it wasn't necessarily that we said no. It's that we didn't have time to say yes. And they ran out of patience, which I didn't blame them for either. So now that's turned into a good thing. But what I would maybe, with that hindsight and look back upon, and kind of a wish that some of those relationships were preserved. But it sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that's, again, it's a bit unique. My dad's motive is not about the company's profits. It's about making games that he's proud of. And it's a beautiful motive, because it leads to good stuff that's potentially timeless, but it does take time. And man, we could talk about that, because we're in the throes of it right now, trying to finish up a game called Alliance that is a really ambitious concept of a simple game about the entire Napoleonic Wars, playable with anywhere from 1 solitaire up to 7 players. And we've got this game. We're almost done with it. We kickstarted it last year, but we're not done. And my dad is diligently working on it. But being the bottleneck is certainly, that's a challenge. We work together on various parts of it. In fact, more and more parts empirically I'm taking over. But he loves maps. He's always, maps are his passion. They're also one of my passions, absolutely. But he started,
I see Harn right behind you.
Yeah, there's another hint to it. That map, the Harn map, is what suckered my dad into becoming a role player. He wasn't a role player. That map did it. So it says a lot. But these days, he is the mapper, and he's working every day actually with his computer and Adobe Illustrator, working on the map, and it's all Alliance all the time right now. He's struggling a little bit with his eyesight, and he's has some. So I had some surgeries to help with it, and some medication that has slowed it down a little bit. But we're actually, interestingly, we're just this week made some big breakthroughs and nearing a point of being able to call that game finished. So that touches on looking back. There's been a number of times when his commitment to quality is at odds with other people's desire to have the game in their hand. And he's never ever once that I can remember consciously ever said, yeah, it's good enough, ship it. He's always said, no, I'm still working on it, and it'll ship or print when it does. But that does come with some challenges for sure, from potentially customers screaming at you or getting impatient. And we may have a little bit of a challenge with the communication about that, because it's an awkward topic, and I don't like to be on defense. So then we'd rather spend our time working on it than talking about it. But sometimes a little too much time goes by and people get a little impatient. And also, I'm lucky because we have this history. We have a lot of people that trust us. That
trust is a big thing. Yeah. Trust is a massive thing.
And I'm nervous always about jeopardizing that. Try hard at a conscious level not to, but you got to be aware sometimes that not everyone that has committed to say Alliance knows us the way a lot of them do. There's a good amount of the customers are quote unquote repeat and passionate fans, and will give us the benefit of the doubt, and would say, if you ask them, I'd rather you worked on it and made it right. Don't rush it. But not everyone understands that, and I kind of wish I wasn't in that boat. So anyway, I'm working on finishing that particular game. It's a beautiful game with a great big scope.
It looks absolutely stunning.
It is beautiful blocks, beautiful map, nice cards, a clean engine again for playing the whole war. We have scenarios, so you don't have to play it all at once, but quick and engaging, and I'm really happy with it. We struggled a little bit on the multiplayer rules, on coping with the shifting alliances, and but we had some breakthroughs in the rules fairly recently, and we're just now tidying up the map, and then we'll be done. And we'll go to the printer and we'll have it back. And I think actually the Julius Caesar game is going to get printed at the same time, so we're going to be looking for.
That's another one that's a deluxe edition that you guys had that was very successful.
Julius Caesar is probably our best-selling game in the block game line right now. The other one that is neck and neck with Caesar is Hammer of the Scots, a really popular one. That's an evergreen.
I've played that. I never went out and got it. Here's Julius Caesar. Actually, this is not the deluxe edition, right, but the deluxe edition is coming with the mounted board, of course, and it'll be glorious.
Yeah. And it's the Rommel in the desert that you have there is a perfect analogy. It's going to look like that with a nice map and high quality everything.
The funny thing about the Alliance and just bringing this up, you have 50 years of history. Here you guys are used to doing things a certain way. If this was 1980, 1990, you wouldn't be having these communication issues. It's the modern age and trying to adapt to a modern age. Okay. And I bet you that has to cause, some of that friction between you and your dad, where you're probably a little bit more open thinking and he's still thinking maybe back then.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't Kickstarter in 1970. There wasn't or 1980 or 1990. You know, as things developed and the world got smaller, people are now hanging on things that this game just would have came out. People would have gone bought it, and this wouldn't even have been an issue.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the arc of that. The business has changed in so many ways. It certainly started out, like you said, with no communication directly with your actual customers, except for the fan letters and things that came in once in a while. But it's next to nothing, and we've gone now to a very direct and personal, transparent relationship, and I love that, actually. But it is a lot of work. You know, managing thousands and thousands of customers individually is a lot more overhead than just shipping a box of games to a distributor who ships them on to a store. So you got to take the good with the bad. But I mean, I love that part. I love the direct communication, and it's more than just direct communication with people on a list like a catalog or something. It's in a lot of cases, it's very human, very personal. Yeah, even with things like Facebook and friends with lots of my customers, and I like it that way. I visited many of them in different places in the world, stayed in their homes even, and played games with their families, and I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities because of that. So it's actually my dad understood that too. He's the one who pioneered the very concept, and we visited people together in the way back. But yes, the adapting to the modern way of doing things takes some give and take. I don't think I would actually want to take credit for being that much more open, actually. Maybe in the last few years, I could maybe take that as an accurate sort of a description. But you know, it's my dad who first invented our database. Like, he coded it, the one that we use to keep track of all our customers. I'm the one who did the website. That's where it starts to diverge, I suppose. In 1996 or so, we had a website going about way back then, and Little America Online before that even. And that's maybe where
Jesus.
Yeah, it's crazy. And long times and so many differences. If you look at the world of 1990 and compare it to the world of 2020, it's actually, it's almost unrecognizable in some areas.
Yeah,
it's really stunning.
I never thought I'd be walking around.
Yeah,
you know, with my phone. We don't even have a home phone.
Yeah. It's been interesting. I think my dad's been pretty nimble at that. Like I mentioned, his job right now is working on the map for Alliance in the software Adobe Illustrator. That's some complex software.
Like, it sure is.
That's not your layman's software.
No, I know.
And he understands it intimately. And I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I think the can-do sentiment in his mind is why. Like, he never says, I can't do that. I've never heard him say, hardly ever, I can't do that, or I don't want to learn that. Which is common, you know, for folks sometimes to reach a point in their lives where they think of things as newfangled and they don't want to learn them. But my dad is not that way. And I think, you know, what's interesting is the reason is for control and the ability to do it the way he wants, to his specifications and his passion. One of the breakthroughs that he would explain about him having Adobe Illustrator skills and a map is that he is not dependent on an artist anymore. And he used to have a back and forth. If he wanted something changed on a map in the old days, that was a big deal, right?
That's
so
right.
The playtesting process, the development process used to involve more people, almost by definition, that were potentially roadblocks or what's the bottlenecks, to use the same phrase, and also personalities, and also just communication. So what we did over these decades is take everything in-house. And there's still a little bit of external artwork done from time to time in certain areas, especially the role-playing stuff. But the rest is done in our actual house, in the shop. And that way we're in control of it start to finish. And I think that just is very attractive for him, especially. And naturally I like it too. So we try to learn the skills. Even right now, we're pushing into another direction with computer games. So there's a.
That's the other thing I saw. Julius Caesar, I believe is.
Yeah, Julius Caesar and Richard III. Both those two board games are on Steam now that you can play with Mac or Windows. And the first, they're live and for sale, and they're really pretty great. They're very attractive. They play mechanically very well. There's some work that I would like to see done to make them better. In particular, the AI and the multiplayer interface need a little work. But the good news is that's actually happening. There's a partnership to make those games. We partnered with Avalon Digital, headmanned by a really great guy named Philippe Thibault in France. And he, as a gamer, which is the important part, put together a company to produce these games. And he has the passion that they be true to the game or as good of an experience as possible. So he's not the coder. He hired another partner to make those games, and that partnership worked for a little while, but then it fell apart, as these things often do. The coder in this case is pretty analogous to my dad working with an artist, right? It's the same basic concept. Eventually, the relationships tend to break down or fade away, and there could be reasons for that we could get into, but it's generally because my dad's not getting what he wants, and what he wants is what he wants. So take it or leave it. And here we are now in 2023 with this new thing we call Blocks. It's the line of computer games that Avalon has pioneered. And Avalon's relationship with their coder fell apart, but Philippe's got the same kind of attitude that my dad does. He's not given up. So he's hired a company in Spain, actually, and they have just updated the game. And I literally this morning downloaded the latest beta of Julius Caesar, and I'm involved in the testing and the design of that. And I've chosen to understand the code. And it's still a little over my head, and I'm learning it, but I took a course in Unity so that I could understand a lot of it. And I also have always kind of understood code from learning HTML at the beginning and a lot of other things. And the purpose of me learning it is, again, it's control. It's to understand. And the purpose of that is to make it better. It's a bit of a holy grail to have a computer game of Julius Caesar that the computer will play against you and you actually want to play. Right now, you're going to beat it every time. The AI is the good tutorial, but it's not a great opponent. So we're working on that as one aspect, and then another, because the other major feature of this game was to play against your friend online. 2 players head to head.
Right.
And that does work in the existing game, but it's a little clunky. And so the Spanish company, again, is working on an overhaul of the multiplayer interface, not just the actual visual GUI interface, but the behind-the-scenes code communication back and forth. And it turned out to be necessary in a way that the original code design, the first guy had pioneered a system that worked pretty well for what you call the I go, you go type of game. You're certainly familiar with that term. But Julius Caesar and the block games have a more interleaved process. In combat, units are firing. It's not always defender then attacker in the classic sense. It's nuanced, and that requires more code because it requires an exchange of data more often. If you think about a battle turn in a classic I go, you go, or defense offense, it's just 2 steps. But in Caesar, there's A, B, C, and D blocks, and defender and attacker. So there's at least 8 phases there in one battle turn where there's going to be a communication back and forth, and a decision needs to be made by a player or an AI based on the previous step. So that's actually a bit of a tall order to do all of that. And
sure is.
But we're trying, and Philippe Thibault is by far the best supporter of that vision that I have encountered, because actually over the decades, I have tried quite a few times to bring these games to computer. Mostly it's gone sort of poorly. We get halfway through it, and either there's a problem on the side of the development or the coding, or then there's also still a problem potentially with the business model, at least in the old days. So we found something here that works, and I am full steam on these Steam games. I fully believe in them. I have to, color my enthusiasm with the frankness that they aren't quite as good as they should be. But I want to tell the world that we're not giving up. We're improving them. And the cool thing is with the Steam game, the updates are free. Anyone who's ever bought the game is going to be benefiting from the updates that we're working on. So past, present, and future, all of us will have the same game. But it's another really nice thing, that wasn't around in the old days, that makes the concept of iteration and improvement and patching so much more practical. So that's cool. And then this concept is scalable too. We have Hammer of the Scots and Crusader Rex in development.
Really?
And if we can get this going, we should be able to have all of these titles. And it's to my mind, it's not meant to replace or compete with the board games. It's just another way to experience
it. You can take it with you.
You can take it with you. You can save it, pick it up.
And they got those Steam Decks now. I got one of those things.
It's a little
play
right there. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. I have not tried it personally, but I've heard of those.
Oh my God, that thing is like the greatest thing on the face of the earth.
All right, well, that speaks highly.
I got it for Christmas, and I was like, yeah. Well, now that I know that these are on there, I'm going to be the first one to download some of this stuff now.
And I think that's a justifiable business expense for me, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can write it off.
Playtest right there. I'm a Mac guy, so I playtest on the Mac, and that actually it's a different compilation of the software, so I don't always catch certain things. So it'd be really, I think, a very good thing to have that.
Oh yeah.
It'd be cool. So that's a fun idea. In fact, now I've got a marching orders for myself to go and get one of those, and yours are to install these games on it. I'll shoot you some codes so you can do that.
I'll take it. One last question before we go. We've been out here for an hour, believe it or not, and it went by like that.
Yeah, man, it's great. It just flies.
Yeah, sure does. Where are we going? What's the next thing that we could look forward from the Great Columbia Games? We've already done so much in the 50-year span. Where do you go next? What do you got coming, and what can people look forward to?
Well, we have actually touched on it a lot in what we've been saying, because the
computer with Alliance, are
on the list. The specific titles, Alliance, which is overdue, and so that's an absolute. That's next, really very next thing that you will see from us is that. The process of deluxifying or enhancing the quality of the games is going to work its way across the line. over the next
Wow.
3, 4, 5 years. As the games sell out is the usual logic of it. We'll upgrade the printing. As I've said before, the games that we print from the beginning, or the designs are still in print, many iterations later. So it's not a new thing that they've been upgraded or developed. It's just reaching a new level of quality on that arc, and that's really exciting. I have all kinds of other things on the works too, though. We have the role playing stuff, which I'm super passionate about. Harn World is a unique thing again because of my dad. It's why it's unique. There was a man named Robin Crosby who brought that world to my dad at a Vancouver, Canada game club, and Robin had drawn that map that's on the wall behind me. I lean out of the way there. So
Yep.
It's
I'm moving this way like I'm going to see it any clearer.
It's drawn with pen and ink markers, Pantone markers from way back. That's how it was done.
Oh God!
Beautiful piece of art, but it's also cartographically satisfying, and in terms of realism and in terms of also depth and creativity. That map sold my dad on a concept, but then my dad took that concept and brought other people in, writers, and he did some writing himself. But he took that fantasy world and he developed it specifically into a product for role-playing. And that's by itself a statement, because sometimes role-playing, people make a role-playing game out of a movie or out of a book, right? And then you're working with that constraint of that movie or that book, right? That's the lore, whether it's Dune or anything else, right?
Right.
This was actually a deliberate effort to make something that tantamount to a sandbox that players and game masters could use endlessly in myriad ways, because it is presented as like an all-encompassing real world. Actually came up with the moniker Harn as a real fantasy world, and it's become used so much it's cliche now. But the real is kind of special. It's modeled after medieval England. So if you know much about the Norman period, when you're reading Harn, it sort of just fits. And it reads like history, like a history book, but in the present tense.
Right.
Everything in the present tense. There's actually history within Harn, and that's in the past tense. But a lot of the descriptions and all of the maps and the characters, so to speak, the people, the politics, that's all written in the present tense, but in a style that feels contemporary to like 11th, 12th century England. So that's unique. Again, it's kind of unusual. It's also presented as gritty and realistic, a little bit like medieval world probably was. There are things like magic from wizards and dragons and monsters and things like that. But in each case, there was a mechanic, a plot device built into the original design and the original description of the world to help game masters work with that. So the role-playing mechanism that keeps the wizards in check is a guild, and you're members of a guild, and the guild self-polices. If you go out in the world and break sort of the rules of the guild, which the biggest rule of the guild is be subtle, they're probably going to hunt you down, declare you a renegade. And the idea here is there's a tool for a player or game master to experience magic, but perhaps to try to explain it away as a miracle or with some subtlety, because fireballs in the street lead to burning at the stake. And so we built that in. And the monsters are regulated by the fact that there's a deity who lives on Harn that dabbles in monster creation. And that's a very colloquial, crass way to put it. It's much more nuanced and detailed in how it's described. There's a whole story, a species, this god who likes to invent creatures, but they have a soul, and the souls are finite and recycled. So it's like the monster goes out in the world and gets killed by adventurers, and his soul goes back to the deity, and he can recreate it into another one. It's completely up to the game master what that means and how that manifests. But you have a tool there, both to create any creature you could ever want, ported in from any world, or invent your own, and then also a check on it, a mechanism that makes it work within the framework of a real feeling world. And then so much other stuff. The world was mapped. There are maps of the oceans and the currents and the winds and even the plate tectonics of this planet. And then there were some other interesting decisions that Robin Crosby, together with my dad, made really early on, like to make it Earth-like. And it's done in the sense that it's a planet that's the size of the Earth, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
That is a water planet with the same basic ratio of water to land, that has continents that are laid out in such a way it's kind of Earth-like, which leads to weather patterns that are kind of Earth-like. It also has one moon on purpose. You know, you could in fantasy world you can do anything you want, but we chose one moon so that you could understand the tides. And we have 24-hour days and 360-day years. All again choices, but they're very nice devices for giving you familiarity and fantasy at the same time. So this beautiful big sandbox first started in '83 is still going strong. This year we did the 40th anniversary Kickstarter of the master book and
oh wow,
the big book that comes with the big map.
Mm-hmm.
280 pages, and it's just been Kickstarted very successfully and coming out fairly soon in June or July. And so there's more of that. So you'd asked me, where are we going? That's on the list too. Harn is endless, literally endless. Right. You can map it and drill down. I mentioned that big stuff like plate tectonics. We get right down to a village and the residents of the village and what their names are and who their relationships are, who their fealty is to. You can look at every different level of the society and something is provided. And then there's room for us to keep expanding. And yet we have a bunch of rules. We expand within the framework, so you can't change anything that's been written. Of course, it's just not done. And we also, Harn is unique in that it has no meta story that goes forward in time. So there's a time. It's the year 720 in Harn time. It's actually called Tuzin Reckoning. It's the name of the guy who codified the calendar. But that calendar, everything in Harn is in 720. There's a history explaining how we got to where we're at, and then there's a current events, and then we stop. But in the current, everything we write is set up to be dripping with inspiration for what might happen. So like there's the most archetypical one that I always introduce because it's easy to understand, but only one of dozens. But that is there's a succession crisis brewing in a kingdom in the middle of Harn because there's an old king with 3 sons that are all illegitimate bastards. And he won't declare for any of them. They all would like to be king, but so would a few other people. And this is all set up. The king hasn't died, but he will. And it's been played. It's been played in people's campaigns in their homes, and it's been played at conventions. I've personally played that in a LARP, live action role playing, where we took on some of those high powered characters, the sons and the earls and and we all postured to see who would be king, and it was awesome. And so that can be gamed out again and again and again. Or if you're into Harn, a lot of people have what they call their P Harn. That's like personal Harn, where they move the clock forward and they tell the story. And so one of the promises we made is we won't contradict your story. Which is another really unique thing. So we still got a lot of room to go there in terms of, without contradicting anything, filling in. It's a gigantic puzzle, and we literally have touched the surface like a fraction. It's so much. And then to top it off, we've embarked on a bold project. It's proving to be really bold for our little company and its resources. We need some help, actually. But we're trying to do a new thing called High Colonies, and that's like Harn in space. That. If you want to give it one quick sentence, Harn in space. And it's not related at all in any direct sense.
That's two different things.
Totally different things. But it is a role-playing environment where environment was the focus of a believable, interknit, gritty, and realistic environment set in the year 2237. Post-apocalyptic kind of world where everybody lives in space on colonies, and there's only about 20 million humans left out of the original, whatever billions. And we've got this process now where we are slowly mapping and developing the space stations and the planets in the year 2237 inside of this lore, the High Colonies lore. And there's a whole history written of how you get from 1990 to 2237. So that has become a whole thing. It's a new line. It's a new exciting thing.
Now, is that coming to Kickstarter?
We did it already. We kickstarted.
Sorry.
the original base book, but we also took pre-orders for some of the expansions, and those are past due, if I'm being frank. So
okay, we
are working on what we owe the world. It's hard, mainly because of the mention I explained a little earlier on about the bottleneck and the and the quality control. The desire to have it be good is a strong desire, and working
but it's a proven commodity. I mean, by look at all the people that send things out nowadays that are half done, okay, and the rules don't make sense and stuff like that, and all these people paid all these money for all these Kickstarters, and what do they get? Well, they get their box, but a half-finished game. Is it better to wait a little bit and make sure that it's right? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and it really is. It really is. But there's an interesting layer where a lot of what you're describing, the folks actually doing it, frankly, think it is right. They didn't have the benefit in most cases of an unfettered market judging them. If they got some customers, backing the game out of the idea and the story and the faith, and perhaps they're connected, right? Friends or past customers.
Right.
If they were to take that game and just take it to a game convention and give it to a group of people, that's where you get real feedback. That is biased, and I think that's not being done, surprisingly, despite the fact that it'd be so easy to do. Yeah. And so, funny thing, this a proliferation of quantity, and even an impression of a proliferation of quality. But I don't think under the hood that the quality is there as often as it should.
Look how many gaming companies are out there compared to the earlier times in Columbia's career here. Okay, now you've entered this age where everybody's making a game, and how do you stand out? They don't care about standing out a lot of times. It's I got to get it out there so I can concentrate on the next thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very different. We just think that way.
You guys have the history and the benefit behind you to take your time, make sure it's right, and then release it, and then go, okay, here you go. Now what? And you don't hear it.
In theory,
You don't hear anybody hanging you guys in infamy.
Not on the big scale.
No, there's always going to be some fool that the squeaky wheel that just wants to be a squeaky wheel.
Yeah, and in some respects, that's a good thing because it does keep us honest, and I appreciate the candor. But yeah, I value the trust, and I will do exactly what we've always done: is choose to get it right, kind of no matter how long it takes. But we're getting there, so that's the good news on that one. We are actually getting there, and it's going to be good. And I have a very strong desire that it not only look good, but that it become one of the classics that people are playing, 50 years from now. That's a tall order, I think, but it's a good one.
Sure, it sure is. So again, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, guys. Listen, go to ColumbiaGames.com. Check out all the fantastic games that they have. We're going to be seeing an array of stuff here on the channel. If you want to see how it's played and how it works, we're going to be doing it here over the next couple of weeks. And I'm telling you, we're going to have a lot of fun with it. Again, Grant, I can't thank you enough for everything that you do. 50 years. That's an amazing thing to have behind you. And you guys have to be so proud of it. And it's just a testament to the great fun, quality, and everything that you guys have done over the years. And I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's been great. For those wondering, I'm 48 years old this year. I will be.
You're a baby.
So Columbia Games was founded when I was -2, and I don't even know if I was a twinkle in his eyes yet. But I've been born into it, and if I can take it another 50 years, that sure would be a wonderful, wonderful outcome of life. And I'm sure going to try. So,
all right.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk. And you know what? You'll just because we had that other connection, right? We lift, right?
Powerlifting, yeah, and lifting and everything like that.
Yeah. From my wife, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
She loves it, and she's made me into a convert, and I love it. We go to the gym 3-4 times a week. She competes once in a while, but that's my hedge for giving me the chance to actually live those 50 years. I'm staying in shape, and I play hockey too.
So, there you go. I still try to do everything I possibly can, even at this age. But
awesome. Never give up. Never stop.
Never give up. But we'll definitely have you back on. I mean, this was fantastic. I think we just scratched the surface, and we got a ton more to talk about for sure.
We do, yeah. Neat. Well, thank you again. So, folks, appreciate your listening, and like you were told, please come over to our website. But not only look at our stuff, but send me some feedback. I love to hear from you. There's ways to send comments or social networks, Facebook, that kind of stuff. Friend me. That's cool. We really do like it that way. It's
the best way to do it. Being open and honest, and that's how you win. All right. Until next time, it's your old pal Rob. Grant, thank you so much. Hang on here for after this, and we'll see everybody soon next week with another interview here on Rob's Tabletop World podcast. Take it easy, everybody. Well, there you have it. Another fantastic interview. Just a lot of fun talking with him. Very, very interesting, especially the father-son dynamic, how that works out, and some of the challenges that can also present itself.
You know, especially when you want to do things your own way, for sure. But another great interview. Next week, I'm hoping to get a hold of some of the people that that we had to push off, or also some people that had vacations that we were going to interview, and we will be doing an interview with them. And so I'll be all caught up, so I can maybe get some rest once in a while. So thank you so much. Make sure you enjoy this, and if you want to listen to it again while you're driving or something, make sure you check it out on the podcast. So until next time, it's your old pal Rob. We'll see you soon, everybody.